Okay, everyone, thanks for joining, and thanks very much to Alex for attending the session today. We're coming to you from Miami. We're actually at SKO now, sales kickoff, and we're all really excited to sort of dive into some of the topics we've got today. So I brought Alex along, who's my friend and our global director of business development at True Commerce. And we want to talk to you about unlocking growth, unlocking European growth through EDI. So, Alex, I mean, True Commerce have got decades of experience. Me and you have worked together for a few years now. When you're sort of talking to your clients about EDI, sort of how does EDI sort of unlock growth? What is it that you talk to them about? How is EDI helping clients?
Yeah, it's a really good broad question, and thank you for the introduction, Rick. Certainly happy to be in Miami and happy to be in this podcast studio. First time for me. When we talk about True Commerce and we talk about EDI, we have three major categories that we help with. One is obviously growth and revenue. The other is cost, and the other one is managing risk. So when we look at that first category of revenue growth, it comes in a few different ways. So you could be in a single market, the UK, Germany, North America, and you need to connect with trading partners. Number one is, can you connect with them? Many of our North American trading partners, major retailers, will not do business with you unless you've got EDI capabilities. We certainly see that in the UK, to a lesser extent in the DACH region, in Germany, where they will trade manually for a period, as you know. So number one, you can't do business. You can't unlock revenue. You can't establish those new trading partners without EDI. So that's the core, all the revenue. But there's another category to that, which is, how long does it take you to establish that EDI connection? And we see such a wide spectrum in what organizations can expect. So for some of them, they could be waiting literally 6 months for an EDI connection. And often that could be because it's a new trading partner for them, a new trading partner for their existing EDI provider, or indeed there are new challenging requirements that nobody expected, at least for them, which means there's a 6-month implementation. If you're with a more established, more competent EDI partner who's got the existing connections, got that expertise, be it in the industry or the geography, they understand the formats, maybe it's X12 in North America, maybe it's Edifact in Europe, and the communication methods and those trading partner specific requirements that come up, you can do it much faster. We're talking about a few weeks rather than 6 months. So when we talk about revenue, what we're saying there is, if you've got the right EDI partner, you could unlock that revenue in 1 month instead of unlocking it in 6 months. Yeah. And if you think, how much is that partner worth to you, then you're losing a lot of money if you're not getting that connection set up fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, awesome points. And I know you know what you're talking about, but it really sounds like, some of the conversations you've had with your clients really taps into some of the sort of business challenges that they have. So I think super sort of beneficial for you to be kind of talking now about how businesses can use EDI for this growth. So going back to, you've mentioned how you're helping businesses grow through EDI. I mean, I know that you've spoken to lots of businesses, massive organizations all through to mid-market and probably smaller ones as well. But ultimately, what types of businesses use EDI?
Gosh, that's a really good question. So there's two ways that we look at EDI, primarily customer-facing EDI and supplier-facing EDI. So if you imagine three key categories of organization, you've got your retailers, you've got your wholesalers and your distributors, and then you've got your manufacturers and your brands. So you asked me, who benefits from EDI? Well, if it's customer-facing, it's often led by your customers who are telling you, we would like to exchange messages, orders, invoices, ASNs via EDI. Now, if you're the supplier in that instance, you might have been fine taking orders via another method, sending back your invoices and so on. So they benefit by simply meeting the demands of their customers. That's a really important point. When we get into supplier-facing EDI, it's a slightly different conversation. And again, that would usually be led by our retailers, by our wholesalers and our distributors. And that's a lot more about efficiency and cost and scalability rather than revenue growth. So that may be that you simply can't continue to grow at the speed you're going because you need to double the amount of full-time employees you have who are processing orders and so on and so forth. So there's two sides of that. I think you've got to think about customer EDI, supplier EDI. We can get into 3PLs and other aspects, but I think that's a good way to conceptualize it.
Yeah, totally. And are there specific challenges that are, more nuanced to those customer and supplier facing challenges that you mentioned there? I mean, does it solve the same challenges for every business, or are you sort of customer facing organization dealing with it one way and your supplier facing ones dealing with it another way?
Yeah, it's a really good question in terms of the nuanced use cases. So if you think of your customer EDI, most organizations start out national, domestic, and they may find that they're in North America where it's all about ANSI X12 as a message format, or they're in the UK, or maybe in Europe, everyone's very, very used to Edifact as their message format. But then as you look to expand globally, the nuance is what are the different formats, what are the different connection types, what are the business rules, what are the advanced configurations, and even sector-specific considerations that you need to appreciate. For supplier facing, it's a slightly different conversation. So if you're a large organization, you've got 200 suppliers, you'd like them all to be EDI enabled and ERP integrated, it's supplier sophistication. So how sophisticated are they from a technology perspective? And that's where we get into the realms of integrated EDI, web portal EDI, and then some other edge cases where we might have to be a bit more thoughtful about how we accommodate them.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I guess when you're speaking to these kinds of businesses, you've spoken to, like we said, businesses across every industry, every size. I guess if someone doesn't have one of these really good EDI systems in place, like what would they struggle with? What can't they do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you're an organization today who doesn't have your own EDI platform and you've been approached by a major customer, your sales team are looking to expand the business, they're doing a great job in their department, and you've now been given the responsibility to enable that through EDI, there's two flavors that you'd have straight off the bat. One would be your web portal EDI. Often that's provided by your customer via their EDI partner, who will allow you to manually receive their orders through a portal, generate advanced shipping notifications, send back your invoices. And that can work to an extent. If you're an emerging business, you've got 3 or 4 of those, it's manageable to do it via a web portal. But as your business grows and you get into the realms of 10, 20 EDI customers, it becomes impractical to manage so many web portals. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
And then just on that point then, so when you're talking about the growth, when you've been speaking to your clients or your prospects and businesses like that, what types of things are they asking for the most of their EDI solution? Or what do they come to True Commerce wanting to solve?
Yeah, it's a good question. What do they ask for the most? So actually something to call out is there are certain things that you might take for granted, and they should. So that can be things like reliability and uptime. You should take that for granted. If you're selecting an EDI partner and they aren't able to demonstrate 99.9% proven uptime, you shouldn't bring them into your business, into your day-to-day business critical operations. So that's something they don't ask for, but it's assumed, and that's really important. You've got to have that 24/7 support. You've got to have disaster recovery and resilience. There are certain businesses, if you're in the bakery business, you'll be getting your orders at midnight, you'll be baking in the early hours, and you'll be sending them out to your clients first thing. If you have any downtime, that could be a huge loss. So there's certainly important things that come up, but it's a really broad question. We can talk about trading partners, we can talk about the ability to accommodate ERP systems, we can talk about geographical expertise, we can talk about support, we can talk about local presence, having people who you could visit face to face. Tax compliance is coming more and more, e-invoicing. There are a number of camps that you have to cover, and no customer's the same, but there are certainly some themes that I've just touched on there.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned then about sort of geographical sort of presence and expansion. I guess if you are using EDI as a tool to, streamline supply chain communication, I guess if you were trying to, a lot of every business wants to grow, right? Everyone's got aspirations to become bigger, to make more money, to do everything more efficient. And I guess EDI is at least could be that critical piece in helping supply chains and businesses expand across Europe, right?
Yeah, exactly that. So we often use the phrase pan-European EDI. A lot of our really exciting clients are now pan-European. So our definition of pan-European would be more than one European country. And we shouldn't take that for granted. It can be quite significant for an organisation if they're currently doing business in the UK and Ireland, they're now going to expand to Germany and the DACH region. That's a big deal for them, and they need a partner who actually understands what that means for them in terms of, as I've said, the different message formats, the different business rules, even the culture towards EDI. So in the UK, you're expected to have it from day one in one form or another. In the DACH region, we know that businesses like to build a relationship, do business for 4 months to 6 months in the first instance before they introduce EDI. Tax compliance, e-invoicing, government mandates are a massive thing in the DACH region that you need to be aware of. So when we think about pan-European, we think about those government sensitivities, those cultural factors. But outside of that, it's the ability to support you in every single country.
For sure.
If you get new trading partners in France or Belgium or Spain, to be equally competent, to get you set up in the same amount of time. And the last one is the ERP coverage. So we often find that with a pan-European business, you get those considerations, but you often get multiple ERPs. You don't become pan-European by accident. It's often through acquisition as well as organic growth. And as you acquire additional businesses, you're picking up additional ERP systems and also sometimes multiple EDI platforms. So there's a huge conversation there, not just about pan-European trading partners, pan-European coverage, but also the ability to consolidate multiple EDI systems into one and support multiple ERP systems. And ultimately, as most organizations do, support them when they consolidate into a single, usually cloud-based ERP system.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic point. You know, we've mentioned ERP, we can always cover that later. But in terms of that sort of consolidation process that you've mentioned there, now I guess, you know, you've got a very successful track record when you were previously, you know, senior sales manager at True Commerce in really helping those businesses, you know, go from a single system or a single platform through to, you know, managing all of the EDI services that maybe they've grown through mergers and acquisitions. Maybe they've bought businesses in another region. They've gone just from the UK to everywhere else across Europe or vice versa. And I assume, you know, having that sort of EDI platform, that really good supply chain communication system is incredibly important for bringing on multiple business units onto your network. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you were to approach that conversation, you would ask the question, and you touched on it there, how do you end up with multiple EDI platforms? I don't think anybody sat in a boardroom would say, I think the ideal strategy is that we have 7 EDI partners throughout Europe. So it's not intentional. You've touched on it with acquisitions and mergers. When you're looking at a merger or an acquisition, there are many critical considerations. Unfortunately, only acquiring businesses that have exactly the same ERP system, exactly the same EDI platform, probably doesn't happen too much.
It's never going to happen, is it?
So that's number one, that can happen. But also, we're sympathetic to the fact that you might be a German business who has a fantastic domestic EDI partner, but they say to you, look, we can't help you in the UK and Ireland. It's not our specialism, or that comes out in the wash after trying to get them to do it. And very much the case when you go to a different continent, you go to North America, many of the domestic national EDI partners we know cannot do North America. So with that in mind, you can see how IT directors, CIOs, CFOs end up having to say, okay, let's use somebody else there and somebody else there.
Yeah.
And over a decade, they're in this awful position where this really well-established, sophisticated organization is managing up to 7, sometimes 9 different EDI platforms. So that's the lay of the land. And we can obviously get into how you address that, what it would mean to address that, and why people come to us with that as a business critical problem.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we've spoken then about European growth. You've just touched then upon North American growth. And I assume when you do grow, no matter where it is, there's added complexity at every level. I'm almost thinking like data silos if you're not communicating correctly. And I assume lots of more issues that, you know, without a platform to coherently homogenize and manage all these systems into one central solution, you're really not going to get the sort of win-win scenario that you're looking for in terms of streamlining efficiencies, reducing costs. That's going to allow you to expand on that broader scale. So, yeah, super good points. And then I guess another point is, if you could give an advice, like a piece of advice, I guess, to a business that is, I guess it could be starting out, but let's continue on the trend of growth. So let's imagine they are an established EDI user. If you could give them a bit of advice when it comes to, let's say they're looking to grow, let's say they've got new requirements, what would your advice be? How can they make that project as seamless as possible?
Gosh, yeah. There's a number of ways that we could approach that in different contexts. And something that we're very mindful of is we can give a generic answer, but actually it's the client's situation, it's an organization's context that matters most when we give advice and guidance. I think if I were to give a cookie cutter answer, the number one thing that matters would be, if you are going to work with someone, what does their client base look like already? So for example, I've used the bakery business as an example. Do they already have 50 businesses just like you in your country, in your region, indeed globally? the chances are they've come across exactly the same problems that will come up for you, so they can get ahead of that. The tragedy is with in-house EDI approaches and indeed less established vendors is you're running into these things for the first time, and that's what causes the pain. It's not that the technology couldn't maybe handle it, it's not that people aren't competent, but it's the first time for them. So specifically to True Commerce, we have 18,000 clients, we have 180,000 connected businesses, so the unknown is much smaller from our perspective. So that's critical. But I think that's one thing. There's probably 12 that we could touch on.
And you mentioned then, so I think when we are speaking to businesses, there's always can they, if they are doing it in-house, continue doing it in-house?
Yes.
But ultimately, I'll ask you why, because you've got a lot more experience in it than I have, but ultimately, often they'll come to an outsourced provider like True Commerce because of the things like you said, we've got the experience, we've done this hundreds of times before, maybe even thousands of times before in some cases. We've connected all the trading partners. We've got this global network of, 180,000 different connections, let's say. So ultimately, when they come to us, I guess they're reducing risk. Is that right? Because, we've done it before and things like that?
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's a topic that comes up a lot, which is the topic of outsourced EDI and why do some organizations choose not to. So what we find is the very largest organizations, the blue chip companies, they can afford to invest in all of the in-house technologies, all of the in-house resources, where for them it may be practical to keep EDI as an in-house function. But what we find in the mid-market and low enterprise space is that there are a number of problems with in-house EDI. Number one, it is certainly risk. So there's a number of risk points. One is that there are a few people who typically are critical. So if you have one person who's unwell for a period of time or retires or whatever it might be, your organization is in a real rut. So that's the single point of failure point. But on a technology basis, we also find that if you have many, many trading partners, they will come to you for an AS2 connection, a VAN connection, SFTP. They will ask for a variety of different message formats. If you are managing EDI in-house, it's highly likely you will not be able to accommodate that range that you require. And that's a key reason why people come to us. It's the risk. They'd like to remove that. They'd like to reduce that. But also it's the ability to accommodate any to any, so that over the next decade, if anybody comes to you with a requirement, with a partner like True Commerce, you can meet that. You can give them exactly what they need and do so in a timely manner. So there are 2 points that we focus on when we look at outsourced EDI. Cost obviously comes up, but I think when you're in a boardroom looking at how can I take my company from $500 million to $1 billion, you're not thinking about reducing heads in IT, but you're actually thinking about how is this impacting revenue growth. So if my in-house EDI teams cannot accommodate what we need in North America or Germany, that will impact us getting that extra $500 million in revenue. So that's the interesting conversation that we tend to focus on.
Yeah, and I guess ultimately, like you've touched on then, the missed revenue targets, I guess, and like I said there, if EDI is becoming unmanageable, if you're reaching a tipping point, there's only so far you can go before it starts to have serious business implications. And it certainly sounds like that's something that is really important for you and your sales cycles and for some of the clients when you've spoken to before.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we talk about a lot at True Commerce within the teams. We say nobody wakes up on a Monday morning and says let's change our EDI solution, let's rip everything out. It's tough, if it's not done correctly. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of disruption potentially, and it's business risk. So we would focus on what would motivate somebody to come to us and say we'd like to change our EDI platform. So that's certainly a change in ERP system. You're moving from one to another, often to the cloud. You're going to have to change your EDI platforms anyway. That's a great chance to upgrade, enhance the solution, outsource, and take on that risk of that project. So that's something they look to gain. But actually, it's also the visibility, it's the control. If you have 9 EDI platforms in 14 European countries for 300 trading partners, it's incredibly hard to have visibility of that. And actually in the conversations that we have, you'd be surprised at how little they know about who they're trading with, how they're trading with them. It's just kind of, let's not touch it because it's working right now. And that's not how you set yourself up for long-term growth. So visibility is critical, reducing risk is critical. We've spoken about cost. Obviously, that can be really important. There can be a big cost saving, and that does matter to some businesses. But actually, the two that come up the most will be reducing risk in a number of different ways, and then also enabling revenue growth. And actually, if you're changing ERP system, you're not doing it for the sake of it. There's usually a revenue objective that underpins that. So we like to align with that and understand what the business is looking to do at the boardroom, not just day-to-day technical problems.
Yeah, no, all fantastic points. And Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here to discuss this with you.
Yeah.
I guess finishing now, if there was, I don't know, have you got any sort of predictions for how, not necessarily 25, but 2025 as we move forward? Have you got anything in mind that you think might be a trend when you're speaking to clients or who you may have spoken to before? What's something that people need to get on board with? What's something that people need to be and businesses need to be aware of as we move into the future?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I didn't prepare for that, Rick. So I'll try and come up with something on the spot. But no, I think really the fundamentals remain the same. And we had a conversation about 2024 and 2025 and how we look at that, and we think more of the same. We were really happy with what we saw in 2024. Let's expand on that in 2025. So for our clients, our prospective clients, they will still be focusing on revenue, cost, and risk, and how their ERP strategies and their EDI strategies can enable that. And then on a more nuanced perspective, we will still be talking to organizations going to the cloud with our ERP systems, or looking at a messy estate that they'd like to consolidate, or really exciting organizations that have done a great job in Europe who want to expand globally, or who have expanded, but they've been quite messy, and now we're there to help them tidy up and consolidate their estate.
Awesome. And I mean, touching back on a previous point, I don't know if you agree, to me, it sounds like you mentioned a lot about compliance and the sort of e-invoicing complexity that businesses in certain regions are probably struggling with. Do you agree that that is something that will become increasingly important as we move sort of, through the year?
Yes, absolutely. So when we look at our clients, thousands of clients, for some of them, this isn't an issue, and we're very aware of that. If you're trading exclusively in the UK and we have a conversation with you about CTC, tax compliance, continuous transaction controls, post-audit, e-invoicing, it's not going to resonate. But for those customers where this is a topic, it's absolutely critical. There's so much urgency there. There are government deadlines where you have to have this in place. And that's where someone like True Commerce has the experience, has the capabilities, and it's something that we've been studying potentially more than anyone, and also having partnerships in place to allow us to go even further with that. So for anyone out there who is thinking about that in 2025, absolutely should be having a conversation with True Commerce to understand how we're approaching it, what we can do to help, and how we can just reduce some of that stress that we know is floating around in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said again, Alex, thank you very much. It sounds like, that e-invoicing is going to be something businesses need to consider alongside all the other points you've mentioned, your costs, your service, efficiency, and everything else. But thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure having you
so much,
you here. No worries. Thank you. Yeah, so thanks everyone for taking the time to watch the session today. Absolutely join us for all our future sessions where we'll delve into topics, like ERP integration, further consolidation topics, e-invoicing, compliance-related topics that Alex had mentioned before. So lots more content coming to help businesses, grow and expand and become more efficient and deal with lots of issues that they're facing, not only today, but, as we move into the future as well. We are partners that work with our clients in a variety of ways and really help them achieve goals, and use our platform as a springboard for success. So certainly tune in and see what else we've got to offer. Thank you.